Snowflakes fell gently from a gray December sky, dusting the sleepy streets of Cedar Hollow in a shimmering white blanket. Twinkling string lights lined the old brick buildings, and cheerful wreaths adorned every door. Christmas carols echoed faintly from the town square, where families bustled about in scarves and mittens, hunting for last-minute gifts. Despite the festive cheer, a sense of quiet tension hovered over Joyful Treasures, the small, family-owned toy store that had been a cornerstone of Cedar Hollow for decades. The store sat nestled between a bakery and a bookstore, its window display a charming scene of handmade wooden trains, spinning tops, and porcelain dolls dressed in velvet. Inside, the warm, nostalgic scent of pine and cinnamon lingered. On the counter sat a small cash register and a jar of candy canes for children. Yet no children came in this year. Joyful Treasures had grown quieter by the season, overshadowed by online shopping giants and chain stores promising deep discounts. Claire Thompson, the store's owner, adjusted the old sign outside the shop as the snow continued to fall. In her late 40s, Claire had inherited the store from her father, who had once crafted the toys himself. Her salt and pepper hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her tired smile was one of determination. Christmas had always been a magical time for Joyful Treasures, but this year felt different, empty. Sales had been dismal. Claire had poured her savings into the shop's holiday inventory, praying that nostalgia and the Christmas spirit would bring customers back. Instead, the store sat quiet, save for the ticking of the old cuckoo clock above the entrance. For Claire, the stakes were high. Joyful Treasures was not just a store, it was a legacy, a place where memories were made. Her father had carved his dreams into every wooden toy on the shelves, and Claire feared she'd be the one to let those dreams crumble. Claire's 12-year-old daughter, Emily, sat quietly at the counter, sketching snowflakes in her notebook. She adored the shop, though she saw the worry behind her mother's brave face. Emily had been asking for a special Christmas wish, "Mom, I just want the store to be okay," but Claire had no magic answers. It was December 23rd, 2 days until Christmas, and Claire knew if the shop didn't pick up soon, it would close for good. The jingling of the shop's bell startled Claire. She turned to see an unfamiliar figure step inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. He wore a long wool coat, polished shoes, and a confident air of quiet authority. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice deep but kind. "I'm just looking around." Claire blinked. Something about him was oddly familiar, though she couldn't place where she'd seen him before. He wandered through the aisles, pausing to inspect the handmade toys as though they were treasures in a museum. Emily watched curiously, nudging her mother. "Who is he?" she whispered. "I'm not sure," Claire replied, offering a polite smile. "But customers are customers." When the man finally approached the counter, he placed several toys, wooden trains, an old-fashioned doll, and a spinning top, onto the surface. Claire hesitated. No one had bought this much in months. "These are beautiful," the man said sincerely. "Do you make them yourself?" Claire shook her head. "No, my father did. He started this store years ago. I'm just trying to keep it alive." He nodded thoughtfully, pulling out a credit card. "It's important to preserve places like this. I'll take these." As Claire rang up the sale, the man leaned in and lowered his voice. "What's your name?" "Claire Thompson." "Well, Claire," he said, handing over the card, "keep the change, and Merry Christmas." Claire glanced at the card and froze. Jeff Bezos. Her head snapped up to look at him, but the man merely smiled, nodded toward Emily, and walked back out into the falling snow. "Mom," Emily said softly. "Was that him?" Claire could hardly breathe. "I think it was." The following morning, something extraordinary happened. When Claire arrived at the store, she found a line of people stretching around the block. Parents, children, and neighbors she hadn't seen in years stood in the snow, waiting eagerly for the doors to open. Her heart raced as she unlocked the door, and the crowd began pouring in, their faces full of joy. "Did you hear?" one woman said excitedly. "Joyful Treasures was featured on the news last night. Jeff Bezos visited here and called it a Christmas gem." Throughout the day, Claire watched in awe as toy after toy left the shelves. Laughter and cheer filled the shop, like magic had returned. Emily danced around the store, helping kids choose their favorite trains and dolls, her Christmas wish coming true before her eyes. By the end of the day, Claire collapsed behind the counter, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. The register was full, but more importantly, Joyful Treasures felt alive again. Emily hugged her tightly. "I told you it would be okay, Mom." Claire looked out at the snowy street, where the lights seemed to glow a little brighter that night. The kindness of a stranger, a man with the power to change lives, had saved her father's dream and brought the true spirit of Christmas back to Cedar Hollow. And somewhere out there, Jeff Bezos smiled to himself, knowing that some gifts couldn't be measured in dollars but in moments of magic. The snowstorm began in the early hours of December 24th, a fierce and relentless flurry that blanketed Cedar Hollow in icy white. What had started as a picturesque dusting turned into a near blizzard, forcing families indoors and shutting down most businesses. The town square, usually teeming with cheerful shoppers on Christmas Eve, sat empty and silent beneath the swirling snow. Inside Joyful Treasures, Claire Thompson paced nervously, her gaze flickering toward the frosted window. It was supposed to be the store's last chance, a final opportunity for Christmas shoppers to come through and save her father's legacy. The previous day's visit from the mysterious man had sparked hope, but the excitement had vanished with the storm. Claire glanced at the shelves, still far too full for comfort. Emily sat at the counter, her pencil poised over her notebook but unmoving. She looked up at her mother, her expression small and worried. "Mom, do you think anyone will come today?" Claire sighed, attempting a brave face. "I'm sure someone will. People always need last-minute gifts, right?" But the doubt in her voice lingered in the quiet room. The clock ticked. Outside, the snow piled higher. Then the bell above the door jingled, startling both Claire and Emily. A man stumbled in, his coat and hat covered in snow. He shook off the cold and stomped his boots, looking as if he'd battled the blizzard just to get inside. Claire rushed forward. "Are you all right?" she asked, noting the exhaustion on his face. "I'm fine," the man grumbled, his tone brusque. My truck's stuck a block away. I've been walking through this storm." Claire furrowed her brow. "Do you need help? I could call someone." No, he interrupted, waving her off impatiently. "I just need something for my daughter." His eyes darted across the shop. "It's Christmas Eve, and I don't have anything for her. I promised I'd bring home a gift." His words carried a mixture of frustration and desperation, the weight of a father who felt like he'd let his child down. Claire understood that feeling all too well. "Of course," she said gently. "We'll find something perfect for her." Emily perked up and stepped forward. "What does she like?" The man hesitated, his expression softening. "She loves dolls, old-fashioned ones. She says they have more personality than the shiny plastic kind." Claire led him to a shelf where porcelain dolls sat in elegant rows. The man picked up one with curly brown hair and a blue velvet dress. He held it carefully, his fingers brushing the fabric as if it were precious. "This one," he whispered. "She'll love this." Claire smiled warmly, but the man's face clouded again as he glanced down at the price tag. His shoulders sagged. "I can't afford this," he muttered, looking away. The silence stretched between them. Emily glanced at her mother, her eyes wide with understanding. Claire felt the conflict pull at her heart. She couldn't afford to give things away, not when the store's future was hanging by a thread. But something in the man's face, the quiet shame of a father trying to make Christmas special, made her pause. "It's Christmas," Claire said softly, her voice kind but firm. Take it. Consider it a gift. The man blinked at her, stunned. I can't accept that. You can, and you will, Claire insisted, placing the doll gently into his hands. Your daughter deserves a magical Christmas. That's worth more than any price tag. The man looked at her, his eyes shining with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. Claire smiled, though her heart ached as she glanced toward the shelves, still full of unsold toys. Just promise me one thing, give her a Christmas memory she'll never forget. He nodded, overcome with emotion. I will. Thank you so much. As he turned to leave, Claire felt a mix of emotions, pride in doing the right thing, but also fear. Giving away that doll might have been the right choice, but it was one less sale she desperately needed. Emily watched the man go, her small voice breaking the silence. Mom, are we going to be okay? Claire knelt down beside her daughter, pulling her into a hug. We'll figure it out, she whispered, though her own voice wavered. Sometimes, the right thing is the hardest thing. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, the world cold and uncertain. Inside, a porcelain doll found its way into a little girl's Christmas story, and Claire hoped, prayed, that somehow, her kindness would come back to her in ways she couldn't yet see. And somewhere, deep in her heart, she remembered her father's words, Christmas magic comes when you give what you can, even when it feels like you can't. Little did she know, magic was already on its way. The snowstorm grew worse as the hours ticked by. Outside joyful treasures, the world looked like a snow globe gone wild, swirling gusts of wind sent flakes spinning furiously through the air, piling up in great drifts against the storefronts of Cedar Hollow. The festive decorations, twinkling lights and cheerful wreaths, shone faintly behind a veil of frost and snow, their warmth seeming distant and fragile. It was Christmas Eve, but it felt anything but merry. Inside the toy store, the air was heavy with silence. Claire sat behind the counter, staring absently at the flickering open sign in the window. The man who had stumbled in earlier, taking the porcelain doll for his daughter, had left a bittersweet emptiness in his wake. Claire's heart swelled with pride at having helped him, but every time she glanced at the shelves still brimming with unsold toys, the pang of reality returned. Emily broke the silence with a tentative question. Mom, what if nobody comes? Claire looked up, startled by how small her daughter's voice sounded. She tried to smile, but it faltered. They'll come, she said softly. It's Christmas Eve. People always need something last minute. But even as the words left her lips, she wasn't sure she believed them. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before, counting down the hours until nightfall. With every tick, the weight on Claire's shoulders grew heavier. The storm outside had shut down most of Cedar Hollow, and the roads were nearly impassable. The festive season, normally full of life and color, now felt cold and empty, mirroring the sinking feeling in her chest. Around noon, the bell above the door jingled again, and Claire's heart leapt. She turned eagerly, hoping to see a cheerful customer bundled up against the cold. Instead, it was her landlord, Mr. Harrison, bundled in an oversized coat, his mustache dusted with snow. Afternoon, Claire, he said gruffly, stomping the snow from his boots. Sorry to drop by unannounced. Claire's stomach dropped. She knew why he was here. Mr. Harrison, she greeted him, her voice carefully polite. Can I help you with something? The older man hesitated, tugging off his hat and wringing it nervously in his hands. I hate to do this today, Claire, what with it being Christmas Eve and all, but I need to know about the rent. It's already overdue, and I can't keep holding off the books much longer. Claire felt her cheeks flush. I know I'm behind, she admitted. Business has been slow, but after today. Claire, he interrupted gently, his voice softer than she expected. You've been saying that for months. I've given you as much time as I can, but I need to be paid by the end of the month. If not, he trailed off, his meaning clear. Emily had stopped drawing at the counter, watching the conversation unfold with wide, worried eyes. Claire swallowed hard, forcing a nod. "I understand." Mr. Harrison sighed, placing his hat back on his head. "I don't want to see this place go under," he said kindly. "But I can't make exceptions forever." As he left, the bell's cheerful jingle felt mocking, and Claire sat down slowly behind the counter, pressing her hands to her temples. Rent was months overdue. If today didn't bring in enough sales to make a dent, Joyful Treasures might not survive the new year. Emily's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom, are we going to lose the store?" Claire looked up sharply, forcing a brave smile she didn't feel. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said. "We'll figure it out." But deep inside, the cracks were starting to show. The hours dragged on, and no customers came. Claire felt like the walls were closing in, the quiet pressing against her like a weight. She glanced at her father's tools, still lined up neatly on the shelf behind the counter. His presence lingered in the shop like a ghost, his hopes, his dreams, his unwavering belief that a little bit of magic could make anything possible. Christmas magic comes when you give what you can, even when it feels like you can't. Her father's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't bring comfort. What kind of magic could save the store now? Giving the doll away to that man had felt right, but what had it cost her? She had so little left to give. Claire closed her eyes, guilt clawing at her. What if her kindness had been a mistake? What if she'd let her family's legacy slip through her fingers for the sake of a single good deed? Emily watched her mother closely, picking up on the unspoken tension. She clutched her sketchbook tightly, her little face set with determination. Suddenly, a faint knock came at the window. Claire and Emily both startled, their heads snapping up. Outside, through the whirling snow, they could make out a shadowy figure. Claire rushed to the door and opened it, letting in a gust of icy wind, and a boy, no more than 10, shivering in a soaked jacket. "Hey there," Claire said gently, crouching down. "Are you okay?" The boy nodded, his teeth chattering. "My parents, their car broke down up the street," he stammered. "They sent me to see if you could call someone." "Please, I don't know what to do." Claire exchanged a look with Emily, who whispered, "Mom, we have to help him." Claire nodded. "Come in, sweetheart," she said, helping the boy inside. She grabbed a blanket from behind the counter, wrapping it around his thin shoulders. But as she turned to reach for the phone, doubt gnawed at her mind. How much longer could she keep giving, her warmth, her kindness, her time, when there was nothing left to hold on to? The world outside was frozen, her shop sat empty, and every act of goodwill felt like another thread unraveling. Yet as she looked at the boy, his small form shaking less and his lips curling into a grateful smile, something inside her held firm. Christmas wasn't about what you had, it was about what you gave. The storm outside raged on, but in that moment, Claire knew, her father had been right all along. Magic would find a way, even in the darkest of snowstorms. She just didn't know how, yet. As evening crept over Cedar Hollow, the snowstorm began to weaken, though its aftermath left the town buried in thick white drifts. Streetlights flickered on, their golden glow reflecting against the snow, casting a warm but lonely light across the empty streets. The church bells rang faintly in the distance, signaling that Christmas Eve was giving way to Christmas night. Inside Joyful Treasures, the air was still. Claire sat beside Emily at the counter, the little girl quietly doodling in her sketchbook while Claire stared absently at the shelves. The store's once cozy glow felt dimmer now, the twinkling garlands overhead casting long, somber shadows. Her heart ached. The day had come and gone with almost no customers. Mr. Harrison's words echoed in her mind, each syllable pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. "I need to be paid by the end of the month." She glanced down at Emily's drawing and smiled faintly. Her daughter had sketched a scene of the toy store bathed in light, with people coming in and out, their arms filled with gifts. Above the drawing, Emily had scrawled in careful, blocky letters, "A Magical Christmas." Claire's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a lock of hair behind Emily's ear. "Thanks, Mom," Emily replied softly. "I drew it because I know everything's going to be okay. Christmas magic will help us." Claire forced a smile, but her heart broke a little more. She didn't have the courage to tell Emily the truth. Magic didn't always come, and sometimes, dreams didn't come true. Just as she was about to suggest they close up for the night, the bell above the door rang. Claire's head shot up. The door creaked open, and a blast of cold air followed a tall figure inside. Claire squinted, trying to make out who it was as the figure brushed snow from his coat. Her breath caught when he looked up. It was the man who had come in earlier, the one who had taken the porcelain doll. Claire stood slowly, her confusion evident. "You're back," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man nodded, his face unreadable as he stepped forward. This time, though, he wasn't alone. Behind him came two more men, all bundled up in heavy coats, each holding large boxes in their arms. "I hope we're not too late," the man said, a small, almost sheepish smile on his face. Claire blinked. "Too late for?" "To save Christmas," he replied simply. Before Claire could respond, the two men began setting the boxes down on the floor. With a quick nod from the first man, they opened the lids to reveal piles of gifts, stuffed animals, dolls, trains, board games, puzzles, enough toys to fill her shelves twice over. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, and her voice wavered. I don't understand. What is all this?" The man stepped closer, his eyes kind but determined. "Let me explain," he said. "My name is Jeff. Jeff Bezos." Claire blinked, her mouth opening slightly in disbelief. Jeff Bezos? The name echoed in her mind, a name she'd heard countless times on the news and in conversations about wealth and success. "I didn't tell you who I was earlier," Jeff continued, his voice calm but sincere. "When I came in this morning, I wasn't just looking for a doll, I was looking for something more. Christmas has a way of reminding people of what really matters, and seeing your kindness earlier, it reminded me, too." Claire felt a lump in her throat as she tried to process what she was hearing. "But, why are you doing this?" Jeff smiled gently. "Because what you did today matters. You gave me that doll without hesitation, even though you needed it more than I did. That kind of generosity is rare, and it deserves to be repaid." He gestured to the boxes. "So I'm making sure your shelves are stocked, and I'm buying every toy in this store tonight. Then, we'll donate them to families across Cedar Hollow who need a little Christmas magic, just like I did." Claire gasped, her eyes welling with tears. You don't have to do this." "I know I don't," Jeff replied. "But it's Christmas, and sometimes the best gifts are the ones we don't expect." Emily's voice broke through the moment. "You're giving all the toys to other kids?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Jeff turned to her and knelt down so they were eye level. "That's right," he said. "Your mom made sure a little girl would have a special Christmas this morning. Now we're going to make sure a lot of other kids do, too." Emily beamed. "I knew Christmas magic would help us, Mom." Claire let out a shaky laugh, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't even know what to say." Jeff stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just keep doing what you're doing," he said. "Kindness like yours keeps the world spinning, especially at Christmas." As the night wore on, the store came alive like never before. Volunteers, called in by Jeff's team, poured through the door, carrying toys and setting up decorations to make the shop even more festive. Word spread quickly, and families began arriving despite the snow, drawn by the promise of warmth, joy, and toys for their children. Claire stood behind the counter, her heart swelling as she watched the shop fill with laughter and love. Parents hugged their little ones as they picked out dolls, trains, and teddy bears, their faces alight with gratitude. Emily ran among the kids, helping them choose the perfect gifts, her giggles ringing through the air. Jeff lingered quietly near the back, watching with a soft smile. When Claire finally approached him, her face glowing with gratitude, she said, "I don't think I'll ever forget tonight. You didn't just save my store, you brought Christmas back to this town." Jeff shook his head. "It wasn't me," he said. "It was you. You planted the seed of generosity, and tonight we all got to see it grow." Outside, the snow had finally stopped, and the church bells rang out again, louder, clearer, and more beautiful than before. Claire gazed out the window, the world shimmering in silver light, and she knew her father had been right all along. Sometimes, the most magical moments come when you give what you can, even when it feels like you can't. And on that Christmas Eve, Claire realized, miracles still happen. As the final families trickled out of joyful treasures, their arms full of toys and their hearts brimming with joy, the store fell into a quiet hum of warmth. The once empty shelves were bare now, but for the first time in months, Claire didn't see emptiness. She saw purpose. She stood at the counter with Emily, who was now fast asleep, her little head resting against Claire's shoulder. The soft glow of the Christmas lights bathed the shop in hues of gold and red, creating a warmth that wrapped around Claire like a blanket. Claire glanced at the empty shelves and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For months, she had been weighed down by worry, fear of failure, fear of letting her daughter down, fear of losing the store her father had loved so much. But tonight, something had shifted inside her. For so long, Claire had believed that giving meant losing something, that every act of generosity took another piece of her away. Yet tonight, as she had watched families smile, laugh, and hold their children close, she realized something her father had always tried to teach her: true generosity doesn't take, it multiplies. Giving the porcelain doll away that morning had felt like surrender, but instead, it had sparked something beautiful, a chain of kindness that had come full circle in ways she could never have imagined. Claire looked down at Emily, who was now snoring softly. Her daughter's unwavering belief in Christmas magic had never faltered, even when Claire's had. How had a child seen the truth so clearly when she, as an adult, had let doubt cloud her vision? She whispered softly, "You were right, sweetheart. Magic does happen." Jeff, who had lingered quietly near the shelves, stepped forward. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said gently. Claire smiled and looked up at him. "It really is." She paused, reflecting on everything that had happened. "You know, for a long time, I thought holding on to this store was just about honoring my dad. I thought if I lost it, I'd lose him, too." Jeff nodded, listening intently. "But tonight," Claire continued, "I realized that it wasn't the store itself that mattered. It was the joy it brought to others. My dad didn't keep this place running just to sell toys, he did it to make people happy. That's what he wanted to leave behind." Jeff's gaze softened. "And you've done just that. Your kindness gave people more than toys tonight, it gave them hope." Claire wiped at her eyes, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her for the first time in months. The weight of guilt, fear, and self-doubt had finally lifted. Her father's legacy wasn't in the shelves or the walls, it was in her heart, and in every person she had helped tonight. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "For everything." Jeff shook his head with a smile. "You didn't need saving, Claire. You just needed someone to remind you of what you already knew." Later that night, as Claire carried Emily to their car, the snow began to fall gently again, as if the storm itself had softened, yielding to the peace of Christmas. The town of Cedar Hollow was quiet but alive with a sense of calm and joy that Claire hadn't felt in years. As they drove home, Claire glanced in the rearview mirror at her sleeping daughter, her face serene. "You're going to wake up to a wonderful Christmas morning," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. And she meant it. When they reached home, Claire tucked Emily into bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead as she slept. Sitting beside her, Claire allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She no longer felt afraid of the future. Whatever came next, she knew she would face it with gratitude, generosity, and hope. Before she left the room, she whispered a silent prayer of thanks, not just for Jeff's kindness, but for the strength she had found within herself. The next morning, Claire and Emily woke to a bright Christmas morning. The world outside sparkled under a fresh blanket of snow, and the air seemed filled with possibility. Emily tugged her mother's hand toward the window, her eyes alight with wonder. "Look, Mom. It's perfect." Claire smiled, wrapping her arm around Emily's shoulders as they watched the sun rise over Cedar Hollow. "It is perfect," Claire said softly. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." "Merry Christmas, Mom," Emily whispered, leaning into her mother's embrace. For Claire, this Christmas wasn't just about saving the store. It was about rediscovering hope, the power of giving, and the beauty of believing in magic, even when it seemed impossible. Because sometimes, the greatest gifts come not from what we receive, but from what we give. As the days passed following that unforgettable Christmas Eve, the impact of Claire's and Jeff's unexpected generosity rippled through the town of Cedar Hollow in ways no one could have predicted. The toy store, Joyful Treasures, may have been temporarily saved, but it was the larger spirit of kindness and community that had been revived in the hearts of everyone who witnessed the events. It began with the families who had benefited from the toys that Jeff had donated. Parents returned to the store, not just to buy presents for their children, but to express their heartfelt gratitude to Claire. They came with food, flowers, and cards, thanking her for making their Christmases brighter when they thought all hope was lost. One mother, her voice shaky with emotion, said, "I don't know how we would have made it through the holiday without those toys. You didn't just give my kids gifts, you gave us hope. That's the real Christmas miracle." Her words were echoed by other parents who had experienced the same gratitude. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt like she had become a part of something bigger than herself. The people of Cedar Hollow were lifting each other up, not out of obligation but out of the simple belief that kindness mattered. Word of Joyful Treasures' miraculous Christmas spread beyond the town, drawing visitors from neighboring communities. They came, not to shop for toys, but to experience the warmth and love that seemed to permeate the air around the store. Cedar Hollow became a symbol of how a single act of kindness could start a chain reaction, spreading the spirit of Christmas far and wide. In the weeks following Christmas, Claire noticed a shift in the local businesses around her. Many had been struggling, just as she had, but they now looked out for one another with a renewed sense of support. The local bakery, which had almost closed its doors just a month ago, donated baskets of pastries to Joyful Treasures every week. The coffee shop across the street set up a donation box for the town's food bank, and even Mr. Harrison, her landlord, surprised Claire with a generous offer. "Your rent's on me for the next 3 months, he told her one morning, his voice softer than it had ever been. "Consider it a Christmas gift, from the whole town." The kindness Claire had shown, and the way she had shared the unexpected gift from Jeff, had inspired others to give in ways they hadn't before. Cedar Hollow, once a town of quiet self-reliance, had transformed into a community of connection and support. For Claire, the ripple effect of this transformation was both humbling and inspiring. She watched as the people of Cedar Hollow came together to care for one another, each small act of generosity becoming a thread in the larger tapestry of holiday spirit. It was as if the magic of Christmas had taken root in the very heart of the town, and no one was immune to its pull. But it wasn't just the town that had been affected. Claire herself was forever changed. The fear that had clouded her judgment for so long, fear of failure, fear of losing what her father had built, slowly gave way to a deeper sense of peace. She had been so focused on surviving that she had forgotten how to truly live. Now, she saw that Christmas wasn't about saving the store or avoiding failure, it was about connecting with others, sharing what you could, and trusting that the universe had a way of providing when you opened yourself to it. She knew that her father's legacy lived on, not just in the store but in every kind act she could offer. Claire no longer saw herself as a lone survivor, she was a part of a community, and together, they could accomplish far more than any one person could alone. As the weeks rolled into the new year, the spirit of kindness didn't fade with the Christmas decorations. The holiday season had sparked something lasting, a quiet revolution in Cedar Hollow. Local schools began organizing food drives, and even the local library held events to raise funds for families in need. People who had once kept to themselves were now engaging with their neighbors in ways they never had before. It wasn't just about material gifts anymore. The true gift was the realization that everyone had something to offer, no matter how small. From the elderly woman who baked cookies for her neighbors, to the young man who shoveled snow from driveways without asking for anything in return, acts of kindness became the heartbeat of Cedar Hollow. Claire and Emily, too, continued to embody the spirit of giving. Emily's school teacher reached out one morning, thanking Claire for the donation of toys that Emily had made from her own collection. It wasn't just the material gifts, it was the lesson in selflessness that Emily had learned from her mother and from the community. Emily's belief in Christmas magic had sparked a change in Claire, and now, that same belief was spreading to others. Months after Christmas, Joyful Treasures continued to thrive, but it was no longer the focal point of Claire's life. The store had become a symbol of something much more important, of the kindness that could change lives and of the community that was built not on profit, but on people. Claire's relationship with her customers, her neighbors, and her daughter grew stronger. Emily, once uncertain about the world around her, now spoke confidently about the value of kindness and generosity. She had witnessed firsthand how a single act of giving could spread, inspiring others to do the same. In Cedar Hollow, the true gift of Christmas had lasted far beyond the season, it had become a part of the town's very fabric. And for Claire, the gift of community, kindness, and the belief in something greater than herself would continue to guide her through every year that followed. It was the night before Christmas, and the town of Cedar Hollow was once again blanketed in snow, the streets glowing with the soft, flickering light of street lamps. Inside Joyful Treasures, Claire paced nervously behind the counter, her hands clenched tightly around a cup of hot cocoa. She had expected it to be another quiet night, another Christmas Eve spent alone with her daughter, but the uncertainty of the past few days had left her restless. The toy store, once buzzing with energy after Jeff's generous donation, was now nearly empty. Despite the outpouring of support, the reality of running the shop was starting to hit Claire. Her rent was due, the bills piled high, and she had done everything she could to keep the store afloat. Yet, tonight, she could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. Would the store survive until New Year's? Would she be able to keep the magic alive for Emily? As she gazed out the window, watching the snowflakes fall, she saw a familiar figure approaching through the storm. Claire's heart skipped a beat. It was Jeff. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and made her way to the door, barely able to believe he was here again. "Jeff, what are you doing here?" Claire asked as she opened the door. Jeff stepped inside, his coat dusted with snow. His eyes were filled with warmth, but there was something new, something urgent. "I couldn't leave without seeing you one last time," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. About your kindness and the way you've kept this town's spirit alive." Claire's heart pounded. "But the store. I don't know how much longer I can keep it open, Jeff. I'm out of options. My rent is due, and I can't afford it. I can't let this store go under. It's too much to lose." Jeff took a deep breath and looked around at the now empty shelves. "You don't have to do this alone, Claire. The town doesn't want to lose this place." He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I've arranged something. A fundraiser, a way to keep Joyful Treasures going, but more importantly, a way to remind you of what really matters." Claire furrowed her brow. "A fundraiser?" Just then, the door to the store swung open again, and a group of familiar faces walked in, families, neighbors, and even Mr. Harrison, the landlord. They were all carrying boxes, bags, and gifts. The air was thick with the scent of pine and gingerbread as the townspeople gathered around, their faces bright with excitement. Claire stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen such a sight. "We've been saving up for this," Mr. Harrison said, his voice surprisingly soft. "You've done so much for this town, Claire. Now it's time we give back. The fundraiser's already begun. We've raised enough to cover the store's bills for the next 6 months. And we're not stopping there." Tears sprang to Claire's eyes as she looked around at the faces of people she'd known for years. They weren't just customers, they were friends, neighbors, a community. One by one, they began placing the boxes on the counter, revealing more donations, gifts for children, food for families, and even a check made out to Joyful Treasures from the town's business owners. "You saved Christmas for us, Claire," a mother said, holding up a handmade quilt. "This is how we can help." Claire's chest tightened with emotion, the magnitude of what was happening overwhelming her. The community had come together, not just to save her business, but to embody the very spirit of Christmas: love, generosity, and selflessness. As she looked at Jeff, who stood by the door, watching the scene unfold with quiet pride, Claire realized that the real magic wasn't in the gifts or the toys, it was in the people who cared enough to act. She stepped forward, her voice shaky but filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank all of you. This is more than I could have ever dreamed. You didn't just save the store, you saved my heart." Jeff smiled, his eyes softening. "You did that yourself, Claire. You brought this community together. We're all just here to remind you that you're never alone." The group broke into applause, and Claire, overcome with emotion, could only nod, her heart full of love for the people who had stood by her side. It was a Christmas miracle, not just for the store, but for her, for Emily, and for the entire town of Cedar Hollow. And for the first time in a long while, Claire knew deep down that no matter what happened, the true gift of Christmas had already been given. It was the gift of love, of giving, and of community. The days following that unforgettable Christmas Eve were filled with an outpouring of gratitude and renewal. Joyful Treasures was no longer just a store, it was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of a community united by kindness. The fundraiser, spearheaded by the people of Cedar Hollow, had not only covered Claire's expenses but had set the stage for something greater, a new chapter for the store and for Claire herself. As the snow continued to fall gently over the town, Claire stood in front of the store the day after Christmas, watching as families passed by, their faces glowing with the joy of the season. The door to Joyful Treasures was propped open, inviting in the crisp winter air and the cheerful sounds of the holiday music that still lingered inside. Claire could hardly believe it. Just a week ago, she had stood in the same spot, overwhelmed with doubt and fear for the future. Now, she was filled with a quiet confidence that came not from financial stability, but from the knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself. Jeff had kept his promise to support the town's efforts, but it was the kindness of her neighbors that had truly saved the store, and, more importantly, Claire's belief in the magic of Christmas. Inside, the shelves were once again stocked with toys, but this time, the toys weren't just products. They were symbols of what could happen when people gave without expecting anything in return. Claire knew now that the real gift wasn't the store itself, but the love and support that had flowed into it. Emily, now fully aware of the miracle that had unfolded, ran up to Claire with a bright smile. "Look, Mom," she said, holding up a hand-carved wooden toy that Jeff had given her as a special gift. "It's just like the one we saw in the window last year." Claire smiled, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "It's perfect, sweetheart. It's the best Christmas gift we could ever ask for." With her arm around Emily, Claire looked around at the store, the heart of the community, and felt a deep sense of peace. It had been a Christmas full of miracles, big and small, and she knew that this was only the beginning. As the town of Cedar Hollow continued to flourish, Claire's heart swelled with gratitude. The Christmas spirit had lasted long beyond the season, filling every corner of her life with love, kindness, and a belief in magic that would last forever. Because sometimes, the greatest gift of all is the one that comes from the heart, the gift of hope, of kindness, and of a community that never lets you go.